The smell of pot roast and possibility filled the kitchen. Jennifer had always been a good cook when she put her mind to it. She placed the heavy ceramic dish in the center of the table, her movements fluid and confident. Her smile was the one I remembered from her childhood, the one that could convince me to help her pick out the perfect prom dress in a single afternoon. "Mom, it's perfect," she said, her eyes sparkling. "It just makes sense." Michael, her husband, nodded enthusiastically from across the table, pausing with his fork halfway to his mouth. "It really does, Barbara. Why should you rattle around in that big old house by yourself?" I gripped my coffee mug with both hands, the warmth a small comfort. The big old house was the only home I'd known for 40 years. It was where Robert and I had raised Jennifer, where I could still hear echoes of her laughter in the empty hallways. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "I don't want to be in the way." Jennifer laughed, a bright, genuine sound that seemed to fill the room. "In the way? Mom, you're joking, right? We've dreamed about this." She reached across the table, her smooth, young hand covering my weathered one. "Think about it. No more yard work. No more shoveling snow. No more rattling around by yourself. We'll be one big family," she insisted, her gaze unwavering. "We found the perfect house. 5 bedrooms, a big yard for grandkids someday. The only thing is the down payment. With the market the way it is." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Michael picked up the thread seamlessly. "If you sold your place, Barbara, the equity would more than cover it. You could live with us rent-free for the rest of your life. We'd take care of everything. You'd just be with family." The words were a potent cure for the loneliness that had been my constant companion for the 5 years since Robert's passing. The silence of my house had become deafening. The idea of nightly dinners, of conversation, of feeling wanted, it was a hope I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. I looked at my daughter's glowing face and saw the 7-year-old begging for a puppy. I saw the woman I had sacrificed everything for. The lawyer's office was impersonal, all polished wood and hushed tones. The real estate papers sat between us on the conference table, crisp and official, black ink on white paper, transforming 40 years of memories into a dollar amount. I stared at the final figure, $180,000, enough for Jennifer's down payment, enough for her dream house. My hand felt heavy as I picked up the pen. Each signature was a goodbye. Goodbye to the kitchen where Robert made pancakes every Sunday morning for 30 years. Goodbye to the living room where Jennifer took her first steps. Goodbye to the master bedroom where Robert breathed his last dot. Jennifer sat beside me, vibrating with an almost unbearable excitement. Michael was on her other side, his hand resting on her back. When I pushed the signed documents back across the table, the lawyer gave a professional nod. "Congratulations. The funds will be transferred to your account within 2 business days." 2 days later, I sat in the bank, the teller sliding a cashier's check across the counter. I drove straight to Jennifer's apartment, the check tucked into my purse like a fragile, priceless artifact. When I handed it to her, she let out a small shriek of joy, throwing her arms around my neck. "Oh, Mom, you did it. You really did it," she cried, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I can't believe it. Our dream is coming true." Michael clapped me on the back, a wide grin splitting his face. "You're a lifesaver, Barbara. Truly, this is the start of a whole new chapter for all of us." Holding the check, Jennifer looked like she was holding the entire world. "I'll deposit this tomorrow," she said, her voice breathless. "The sellers accepted our offer. We close in 30 days." For that single shining moment, watching her unbridled happiness, I felt a surge of hope, so powerful, it almost brought me to my knees. I had done the right thing. I had bought my way back into my family. Moving day felt like a festival. Jennifer and Michael were a whirlwind of energy, carrying boxes, their laughter echoing in the spacious rooms of their new house. My room, the guest room, had been painted a soft lavender, Robert's favorite color. Jennifer had insisted on it. "What do you think, Mom?" she asked, standing on a stepladder as she hung my framed watercolor prints on the wall. I held the frame steady for her, my hands covering hers for a moment. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. "This is going to be perfect," she replied, stepping back to admire her work. For a while, it was. The first month was everything they had promised. We had family dinners every single night, the conversation flowing as easily as the cheap red wine Michael favored. Jennifer would ask about my day, what book I was reading, and coax stories from me about her childhood. Michael would debate politics and current events with me, treating my opinions with a surprising level of respect. I felt useful again. I felt wanted. The house was alive with the sound of their voices, the smell of coffee in the morning, the comfortable rhythm of lives lived together. 3 weeks after I moved in, Jennifer knocked gently on my door. "Want to help me plant some tulip bulbs out front?" she asked, holding up a bag of them, dirt already under her fingernails. "For spring, something to look forward to." We worked side by side in the crisp October sunshine, our hands in the cool earth, planting the garden. We talked about colors and bloom times, about how beautiful it would look when everything came to life. In that moment, kneeling in the dirt next to my daughter, I felt like a mother again, not just a guest in someone else's house. I had made the right choice. I was home. The change began in January. It was a Tuesday. I was at the kitchen counter stirring my morning oatmeal when Michael swept through on his way to the garage, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. For weeks his morning routine had included a cheerful morning, Barbara, as he rushed past. This time, there was only silence. He moved around me as if I were a piece of furniture he had to navigate. "Morning, Michael," I offered, my voice hopeful. Nothing. Not a glance, not a nod. He just opened the door to the garage and was gone. I told myself he was stressed about work, preoccupied, but the silence continued the next day, and the day after that. It stretched from days into a week, a thick, uncomfortable blanket smothering the easy morning routine we'd once had. Soon, our paths in the kitchen became an awkward dance of avoidance. He would wait until I was finished to get his coffee, or I would find myself taking my oatmeal back to my room just to escape the palpable tension. The warmth of the house had developed a distinct chill. One evening, I asked Jennifer if everything was all right with him. She waved a dismissive hand, not looking up from her phone. "He's just busy, Mom. Big project at work. Don't take it personally." But it felt personal. It felt like the deliberate turning of a cold shoulder. It was the first crack in the perfect facade, a hairline fracture I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. The family meeting was Michael's idea. He called it on a Sunday evening in March, his tone suggesting a corporate briefing rather than a chat between relatives. We sat in the living room, me in my armchair, Jennifer and Michael on the couch opposite me. A formidable, united front. Michael held a yellow legal pad. Jennifer and I were talking, and we think it would be helpful to establish some house rules, just to make sure we're all on the same page, he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone addressing a problematic tenant. I gripped the arms of my chair. "House rules in the house my money had helped buy. Just some small things," Jennifer said quickly, her smile tight and forced, "to make things run more smoothly." Michael cleared his throat and looked down at his list. "First, the television volume. We can hear it upstairs at night, so if you could keep it below level 10, that would be great." I listened at a barely audible whisper as it was. "Okay," I said. "Second, dishes. We'd appreciate it if you washed, dried, and put away your dishes immediately after using them. It helps keep the kitchen tidy," he continued. I already did that, ever since I'd overheard him complain about me leaving a single bowl in the sink. "And the bathroom schedule," Jennifer chimed in. "Michael has to be out the door by 7:30, so maybe you could plan on showering after he's left for work." The list went on my designated space in the refrigerator, the thermostat settings, the proper way to sort the recycling. Each new rule was a brick in a wall they were building around me. I felt my world shrinking, my status in the house diminishing from family to tolerated occupant. "This all seems reasonable," I finally said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Great." Michael slapped the notepad shut, the sound unnervingly final. "Glad we're all in agreement." The meeting was adjourned. I was dismissed. The family dinners stopped a week after the house rules were established. At first, it was subtle. "We're eating a bit earlier tonight, Mom," Jennifer would say. "Didn't want to disturb your reading time, so I would wait in my room until I heard their plates being cleared. Then emerge into the empty kitchen to heat my portion in the microwave. From my armchair, I could hear their conversation in the dining room, their laughter flowing freely. A party I was no longer invited to. One night, I decided to try. I heard them talking and walked out of my room, making my way to the dining room. As I appeared in the doorway, their conversation stopped dead. The laughter died in their throats. They both stared at me, their faces a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "Oh, Mom," Jennifer said, "we thought you were reading." "I finished my chapter," I replied, my hands in my pockets. "What were you talking about?" A thick, awkward silence fell over the table. Michael took a long sip of his wine. Jennifer busied herself, rearranging her fork. "Nothing important." She finally said, "Just work stuff. You wouldn't be interested." The message was clear. An invisible wall stood in that doorway, and I was on the wrong side of it. "Right," I said, forcing a smile. "Well, I'll just get my dinner." I retreated to the kitchen, my back burning with their stares. As I set the microwave, I heard their conversation start up again, this time in hushed, urgent whispers. I didn't need to hear the words to know they were talking about me. I'd been avoiding them for 3 days since the last awkward encounter. But the mail still needed to be collected. I stepped out the front door and stopped dead. A gleaming silver Audi Q5 sat in the driveway, so new it still had the dealer tag attached. It was parked in the spot where my old Honda used to be before I'd sold it 3 months ago. Convincing myself it was a practical move for a one-car household. It was a beautiful machine, I had to admit. I knew cars. 40 years as a high school teacher meant I knew my students' parents' vehicles and their price tags. This was $50,000. Easy. The front door opened and Jennifer and Michael emerged, beaming like new parents. "What do you think?" Michael's chest swelled with pride. Q5, fully loaded. The electric bill slipped from my fingers. I bent to retrieve it, my mind racing. That car represented 18 months of the mortgage payments I was helping them make. "Whose beautiful car is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Ours," Jennifer said, running a hand along the car's fender as if stroking a prized horse. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. "Wouldn't it have been smarter to put that money toward the mortgage?" I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle. Jennifer's face hardened instantly. The pride vanished, replaced by a cold authority. "Mom, do not interfere in our business," she said, her voice sharp. Michael stepped forward, his arm draping possessively over her shoulders. "We're adults, Barbara. We can handle our own finances." Their own finances, built on the foundation of my life's savings and subsidized by my dwindling pension. I took a step back. The retreat automatic. "Of course you can," I said, my voice level. "It's a beautiful car." That night, I didn't turn on the television. The numbers were circling in my head like vultures. At my small desk, I laid out the evidence of my own financial ruin. 6 months of bank statements, my personal ledger, my pension documents. A teacher's habits die hard. I needed to see the brutal arithmetic in black and white. My fingers tapped the keys on the calculator. My pension, $2,100 per month. Their mortgage payment, which I made for them, $2,800. The extra $700 came directly from the savings I'd so carefully guarded, and that account was bleeding out month by month. I added it up. The $180,000 from my house sale that served as their down payment, plus the 6 mortgage payments I'd already made, another $16,800. My total investment in their dream stood at $196,800. I opened my ledger, the small notebook where I tracked every dollar I spent. The pages told a story of quiet denial. $1.20 for a week's groceries, $5 for a small bag of coffee that had to last a month. My winter coat was held together with safety pins because a new one seemed like an indulgence I couldn't afford. Meanwhile, their new car gleamed under the streetlight outside my window, a monument to their priorities. Their combined income, I knew from a stray pastub I'd seen, was over $150,000 a year. They could have easily afforded the mortgage without my help. They hadn't needed me. They had simply used me. I was a funding source that came with a built-in guilt trip. Laughter drifted down from upstairs. They were celebrating. I was running the numbers on my own exploitation. The equation was clear. I had become their personal ATM, and the bank of Barbara Henderson was about to close. Sunday morning arrived, heavy with an expectation I knew was foolish. It was Mother's Day. I dressed with more care than usual, choosing my best blouse, a faded but clean lavender cardigan. Perhaps today would be different. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard Jennifer's voice from the kitchen. It was animated, bright, full of a warmth I hadn't heard, directed my way in months. She was on the phone. "Dorothy, Happy Mother's Day." CHIRPED. Dorothy was Michael's mother. The enthusiasm in her voice was a physical blow. It was the genuine joy of Christmas mornings, unrehearsed and infectious. "Come over tonight for a special dinner," she continued. "We'll have everything ready. Your favorite pot roast and that chocolate cake you love. Yes, 6 o'clock will be perfect. Richard will love the flowers I picked out." My heart, against all logic, lifted. Flowers, a special dinner, a celebration. I straightened my blouse and started down the stairs, making my steps deliberate, announcing my approach. "It's going to be wonderful," she was saying. A real celebration for someone who deserves it. The words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, after months of feeling like a burden. Maybe today I would be celebrated instead of just tolerated. See you tonight, love you. She ended the call with a final burst of affection. I reached the kitchen doorway just as she turned. Our eyes met. Her bright smile dissolved into a neutral, polite mask. Good morning, she said, her tone the same she would use with a hotel clerk. No mention of the holiday, no flicker of the warmth she'd just lavished on her mother-in-law. Good morning, I replied, waiting. The silence stretched. Nothing came. She moved past me toward the dining room, her mind already on her preparations. The joy had been packaged and delivered. For me, there was nothing left in this house. There was only room for one mother to be celebrated. And it wasn't me. Dorothy and Richard arrived precisely at 6, their arms laden with a bottle of wine and a potted orchid. Richard, a retired mechanic with hands that showed a lifetime of honest work, gripped my own in a firm, warm shake. Barbara, how are you? Haven't seen you in too long. Dorothy touched my arm gently. What a beautiful home, she said, her admiration sincere. I watched Jennifer transform. The cold, efficient landlord disappeared, replaced by a gracious, doting daughter-in-law. She laughed at Richard's jokes, refilled Dorothy's wine glass without being asked, and fussed over their comfort with a flawless performance of familial love. Mom, come join us for dinner, she called, her voice carrying the appropriate warmth for her audience. Thank you. That's very kind, I replied, my voice measured, keeping the careful distance she had taught me. The dining room table was set with the good china and a floral centerpiece. My place setting was at the far end, an afterthought. Dorothy's was at the head of the table, a throne from which she held court. Throughout the meal, she and Richard treated me like family, asking about my health, my books, my opinions on current events. They included me. Jennifer, meanwhile, masterfully steered the conversation, keeping it light. She was a gracious hostess, the picture of devotion. Michael played his supporting role, deferential to Dorothy, casually mentioning work successes to demonstrate his own provider status. They were a team, and tonight's production was titled The Perfect Happy Family. I was merely a background character. As the main course plates were cleared, Jennifer stood, a theatrical smile on her face. She picked up a champagne glass, the crystal catching the candlelight. Before dessert, she announced, we have a special surprise. Michael emerged from the kitchen carrying a small, elegantly wrapped gift box. He placed it in front of Dorothy. Jennifer raised her glass. Happy Mother's Day, Dorothy. You've been like a real parent to me, and you deserve something special. Dorothy opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, lay the keys to the Audi. A stunned silence fell over the table. Jennifer, we can't accept this, Dorothy stammered, her eyes wide with shock. Richard covered his mouth with his hand. Nonsense, Michael said with a proud grin. It's already yours. Title's in your name, insurance paid for the first year. A $50,000 gift, presented with the casual flair of a dinner party favor. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Then Jennifer's eyes flicked to me at the far end of the table. Her warm smile vanished, replaced by a businesslike efficiency. Oh, and Mom, she said, her tone shifting as if reminding me to take out the trash. The mortgage needs to be paid by Sunday. The juxtaposition was a deliberate, calculated cruelty. I set my fork down slowly. The metallic clink loud in the suddenly quiet room. I met her gaze. Don't I deserve even a small gift? The question was quiet, weighed down by months of sacrifice. 4 pairs of eyes turned to her. She didn't hesitate. The single word was a judge's gavel, absolute and final. It echoed in the silence, a brutal, honest truth. I felt a strange sense of clarity, a cold, hard peace. I smiled, a controlled expression I had practiced for this very moment. Of course not, I said. I pushed my chair back from the table, my movements deliberate and dignified. Excuse me. I walked out of the room, leaving them in the wreckage of their perfect celebration. I closed my bedroom door, the sound of their nervous, resumed chatter a distant buzz. The performance was over. The final illusion had shattered. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room that had been my prison for 6 months. I was no longer sad. I was calculating. At midnight, when the house was finally silent, I began to work. I opened my drawers and packed with the surgical precision the Army Nurse Corps had taught me 40 years ago. 2 suitcases, only the essentials. I left the expensive bracelet Jennifer had given me for Christmas on the nightstand. its clasp still unopened. I knew even then that her gifts came with strings. The note required careful thought. It couldn't be pleading. It had to be a statement of fact, a closing of accounts. I took a piece of paper from the desk and wrote in clear block letters, "I'm gone. By the time you read this, I will have stopped payment on your mortgage. I am also changing my will. I am tired of being your ATM, Barbara." I placed the note on the kitchen table, weighing it down with the salt shaker. It was a final, formal declaration of independence. As I made a final sweep of the room, my eyes landed on an old tablet half hidden under a stack of books. I'd given it to Jennifer years ago. She'd replaced it and left this one for me to use. On a hunch, I pressed the power button. It flickered to life, the screen showing a dozen notifications. Her cloud account was still logged in, still SYNCED. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened her messages. I scrolled back past months of dinner plans and shopping links, back to October of last year, before I sold the house, and there it was, a chat log between her and Michael. "Jennifer, she's hesitating. She said she doesn't want to be in the way. Michael, lay it on thick. The one big family stuff. We need that $180,000. Jennifer, the house is perfect. Michael, I know. Convince her tomorrow at dinner. Once we have the down payment, we can manage her pension checks for her too. It'll be easier to help her with her finances. Jennifer, and in a few years, when her savings run out, we can look at that nice nursing home near my office, the one with the gardens." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just greed. It was a premeditated, long-term plan to drain me of everything I had and then dispose of me. This wasn't a betrayal born of carelessness. It was a conspiracy. I grabbed a USB drive from my laptop bag and, with shaking hands, downloaded the entire chat history. The file transfer was agonizingly slow. Finally, it was done. I slid the small drive into my pocket. It was a cold, hard piece of leverage. It was justice. The taxi app on my phone promised a car in 15 minutes. It was 2:30 in the morning. I carried my suitcases down the stairs one at a time, each step a silent rebellion against the people sleeping peacefully above me. The weight on my shoulders seemed to lighten with every step. I didn't look back at the living room or the kitchen. They were just rooms in a house, no longer a home. The front door closed behind me with a soft click, the sound of a cage opening. No dramatic slams, no final confrontations, just the quiet exit of a woman who had finally learned the difference between being needed and being used. The taxi arrived, its headlights cutting through the suburban darkness. "Where to?" the driver asked, his voice rough with sleep. "The desert rose in over on the highway," I said. As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked at the house one last time. The new Audi gleamed in the driveway, a silver monument to my own foolishness. The taxi merged onto the highway, and for the first time in months, I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. It felt like freedom. The night clerk at the desert rose and barely looked up from his crossword puzzle as I set my suitcases down. The lobby smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. It was a place of anonymity, of new beginnings and quiet endings. "A week from now," I said, placing my credit card on the counter, "possibly longer." The simple act of making my own financial decision was a pleasure I hadn't realized I'd missed so acutely. Room 127 was sparse and clean, a single bed, a small desk, and a television bolted to the wall. It wasn't a home, but it was a sanctuary. It was my headquarters. I hung my clothes in the narrow closet with the same precision I'd used to pack them. Everything had its place. For the first time in months, I had my own place. That night, I slept without listening for footsteps in the hall, or the sound of hushed, angry whispers through the walls. When I woke, it was to silence. My phone screen showed 17 missed calls and 11 voicemails. I listened to the first one. Jennifer's voice, tight with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Mom, where are you? You can't just disappear. The bank called. The mortgage payment was canceled. Call me back right now." I listened to the message, then calmly turned the phone off and placed it in the desk drawer. My silence, my choice. My first order of business was to find a lawyer. I spent the morning at the Phoenix Public Library, using their computer to research estate attorneys. I found a man named David Morrison whose office was downtown. He seemed competent and known sense, just what I needed. As I was printing his contact information, my phone, which I had reluctantly turned back on, buzzed with an email notification. It was a security alert from my cloud service. New login detected from an unknown device in your home area. My blood froze. Jennifer and Michael, they must have found the old tablet. They knew. A cold dread washed over me. I raced out of the library, catching a bus back toward the motel. My heart hammered against my ribs. The USB drive with the chat log was in the side pocket of my laptop bag. Back in the motel room, I burst in. The scene was one of quiet chaos. The bedclothes were thrown back, the drawers ajar, the contents of my suitcase hastily rummaged through. My laptop bag lay open on the desk. I plunged my hand into the side pocket. It was empty. The USB drive was gone. They hadn't just found the tablet. They had found me. They had broken into my room and destroyed the one piece of concrete evidence I had against them. My advantage was gone. Now it was just my word against theirs. Panic gave way to a cold, hard resolve. They had overplayed their hand. This was no longer just about money. It was war. I sat opposite David Morrison in his 15th floor office, the city of Phoenix buzzing below. He was a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and an air of unflappable competence. I explained my situation in clear, concise terms, leaving out the part about the stolen evidence. It was irrelevant now. A legal dead end. All that mattered was what I did next. I want to stop all future mortgage payments effective immediately, I said, and I want to rewrite my will. He listened without interruption, making brief notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Are you certain about this decision, Mrs. Henderson?" he asked, his tone professional but not unkind. "Completely disinheriting your only child is a significant step." "Absolutely," I said, my voice steady as granite. She made her choice on Mother's Day when she chose cruelty over kindness. The new will was simple and elegant. The bulk of my estate would go to Robert's Church, with smaller bequests to a local women's shelter and the public library. Jennifer's name appeared nowhere in the document. David slid the papers across his mahogany desk. "Your daughter will receive formal notification of these changes within 30 days. I picked up the pen and signed each page, my hand perfectly steady. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of justice. It was the act of a woman building a new future on the ruins of the old one. As the ink dried, I felt the last of the weight lift from my shoulders. The voicemails kept coming, each one more frantic than the last. I would turn my phone on for a few minutes each day, a grim ritual of listening to their desperation before deleting the messages and turning it off again. First came the anger. Michael's voice, rough and threatening. "You think this is a game, old woman? You have no idea what you've done. You're going to regret this." Then came the manufactured concern. Jennifer, her voice laced with fake tears. "Mom, please, we're worried about you. We just want to know you're safe. Please call us." Finally, there was the panicked, pleading Jennifer again, her voice cracking. "Mom, the bank sent a letter, a pre-foreclosure notice. We can't afford this without you. Please, Mom, please come home. We'll change. I promise." I listened to them all, a detached observer cataloging the stages of their self-inflicted crisis. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught. They were terrified of the consequences. On the third day, after a particularly desperate message from Jennifer, I took a final decisive step. I went into my phone settings, found her number, and pressed block. The digital tether was cut. The hunt was over. A week after I left, they found me. I was on my usual park bench reading a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt when I sensed their frantic energy approaching. Jennifer's Honda was parked crookedly across two spaces, as if abandoned in a hurry. "Mom," Jennifer's voice was a choked sob. Her makeup was streaked, her hair a mess. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I'm so sorry. We were wrong. Please come home." I closed my book, using a receipt as a bookmark. "This isn't my home anymore, Jennifer," I said, my voice calm. Michael arrived behind her, his usual swagger gone, replaced by raw desperation. "Old woman, you can't do this to us. We have a mortgage." I stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust from my slacks. "You have a mortgage," I corrected him gently. "I have my independence." The simple truth of it hit them like a physical blow. They had seen my support as an obligation, a permanent fixture in their lives. The idea that I could simply turn off the tap had been inconceivable to them. "We'll change," Jennifer pleaded, grabbing from my arm. "We'll treat you better. We'll include you." I looked at her, at the desperation wearing the mask of remorse, and I felt nothing but a distant pity. "Family doesn't threaten each other with nursing homes," I said. gently removing her hand from my sleeve. Family doesn't spend $50,000 on a car while demanding mortgage payments from a pensioner. Michael's face contorted in a sneer of rage. You selfish old fool, he spat. What about our investment? What about the plans we made? Plans you made without consulting me, I replied, my voice as steady as the desert sun above me. Investments you made with my money while treating me like an unwelcome guest. I picked up my book. Don't look for me again, I said. It wasn't a request. It was a command. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the ruins of their own making. 2 days later, there was a knock on my motel room door. I opened it to find Dorothy standing there, holding the keys to the Audi. She looked older than she had at the dinner party, her face etched with shame. Barbara, she said, her voice low, can I come in? I stepped aside. She sat in the room's only chair, turning the keys over and over in her work-worn hands. They told me everything, she said without preamble. The house, the mortgage payments, the plan, everything. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. I'm ashamed. I raised my son better than that. She pushed the keys across the small table toward me. I can't keep this. It's not a gift. It's dirty. It's your money, Barbara. You take it. Sell it. Do what you want with it. I looked at the keys, the gleaming Audi logo, a symbol of all the pain and betrayal. I pushed them gently back toward her. That was a gift from your son and his wife, Dorothy. What you do with it is your business. This was never about the money or the car. What was it about then? She asked. Respect, I said quietly. It was about respect. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. She stood up, leaving the keys on the table, while she said, extending her hand, for what it's worth, you have my respect, Barbara, and my deepest apologies. I shook her hand. It was the validation I didn't know I needed. It was an act of decency from an unexpected ally, and it meant more to me than the car ever could. The next day, I called a real estate agent. His name was Robert, and he had a warm, no-nonsense energy that I liked immediately. I'm looking for a small house in Scottsdale, I told him, a quiet neighborhood with good neighbors and plenty of trees. He took me to see 3 houses that week. The third one was perfect, a 2-bedroom, adobe bungalow with a small, slightly overgrown garden in the back. It had good bones, a solid roof, and a front porch perfect for sitting on a summer evening. As I walked through the empty rooms, I didn't feel the echoes of a life I'd lost. I felt the promise of a life I was about to begin. I'll make an offer, I told Robert, standing in what would be my new kitchen, full asking price. The process was the mirror image of the last time I dealt with real estate. This time there was no sense of loss, only anticipation. I signed the papers in Robert's cheerful office, my signature firm and clear. This was my house, my decision, my future. Moving day was quiet and simple. I had 2 suitcases and a few boxes of books. I spent the first night on a mattress on the floor, eating takeout from a box, and I had never felt more at home. 4 months later, the garden was thriving under my care. The Arizona morning sun was warm on my back as I staked my tomato plants. Life had settled into a comfortable, peaceful rhythm. Coffee at sunrise, a few hours in the garden. Afternoons spent reading on my front porch. The mail arrived. A mix of utility bills and grocery store flyers. Tucked among them was a crisp cream-colored envelope with David Morrison's law firm as the return address. I opened it in my kitchen, the one I'd chosen, at the table I'd bought. His note was brief and professional. The foreclosure proceedings on your former residence concluded last month. He had written in his precise hand. The house was sold at auction. I thought you would want to know. I set the letter down. 3 missed mortgage payments, and their carefully constructed world had crumbled. Without my monthly subsidy, their lavish lifestyle was unsustainable. The Audi was repossessed first, then the house. David's sources told him they were renting a small apartment across town, their marriage straining under the financial pressure they had never learned to manage on their own. I felt no joy, no sense of victory, only a quiet, profound peace. It was the simple, unavoidable outcome of their own choices. They had lost everything because they never understood the difference between what is earned and what is taken. That evening, I was in my armchair reading, a cup of tea on the table beside me. The house was quiet, filled with the comfortable sounds of its own settling. My phone rang. Its vibrations stark in the silence. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old life, the old obligations. A part of me wondered if it was her, calling from a new number. ready with fresh pleas or new demands. The phone rang a second time, a third. I looked away from the screen, out the window at my garden where a hummingbird was building a nest in the palo verde tree I had planted. She understood independence. It had taken me 68 years to learn the same lesson. I let the call go to voicemail. I would not listen to it. I picked up my book and continued reading. The work in the garden wasn't finished, and summer was coming. For the first time in a very long time, I was eager for it to arrive. I had found my peace,